Being a sports photographer can be a real tough gig because your job is to capture moments in time that can literally be over in a split second. And that's why professional sports photographers are going to rely on high-end pro cameras like the Nikon D5, the Canon 1DX Mark III, for example. These are cameras that have the ability to shoot at frames upwards of 15, 20 frames per second, have amazing focusing abilities and really fast shutter speeds. But there is a type of sports photography that doesn't rely on fast shutter speeds, nor do you need a high-end professional camera. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm talking about the classic panning technique. Hi, Paul here from Photo Genius. Welcome to my channel, which is all about helping you get more from your digital camera so you can take better photos. I upload new videos every single week, so if you're new here, please consider subscribing. This video is all about a very popular technique called the panning technique, often used by sports photographers as a great way of showing movement and motion. So let's start off by looking at some example images. So here's a couple of images that I shot just a few days ago. Notice how the subject is sharp but the background is nice and blurry. It's this that makes the panning technique work because you get a feeling of speed, movement and motion. The background blur is a result of moving the camera sideways. The skill is in moving the camera in time with the subject. So the subject appears sharp whilst the background blurs. So let's begin by taking a look at the camera settings. Now you're definitely going to want to get out of the auto mode, and my recommendation is to use a mode called shutter priority. Now you can select this by using the camera's mode dial on the top of the camera. On most cameras this will be the letter S, but if you've got a Canon camera like this one, it's TV, which also stands for time value. Now shutter priority is a great mode for beginners, but actually is also used by most sports photographers as well. I use shutter priority when I'm taking pictures of my son playing soccer, for example. It's a really great mode. Now of course, if you're just starting out, you may be less familiar with things like shutter priority, so let me give you a quick overview of what it does. If you think about it, photography is the art of recording light. With no light, there is no image. And we can control how much light our camera records by adjusting three things: the shutter, the aperture and the ISO. These three things are often collectively referred to as the exposure triangle. Now we can clearly see the shutter speed, aperture and ISO on the back of this Canon camera. So these three things make up our exposure triangle, and because we're in the shutter priority mode, that means we can change the shutter speed and the camera looks after the rest. So currently the shutter speed is really fast at 1/4000th of a second. If I slow it down to 1000, the camera compensates by adjusting the aperture. That's the F number, currently f10. If I slow the shutter down again, you can see the F number changing. Again, that's the camera adjusting the aperture. That's the great thing about shutter priority mode. It allows us to concentrate on what's really important for us, and that's the shutter speed. Now the real trick with the panning technique is to select a shutter speed that will blur the background but not the subject. So which shutter speed should we select? Well, unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all solution here. Let me explain. So looking at this first image, we don't really get any sense of movement because everything is sharp. It looks like this cyclist is not even moving, and that's because the shutter speed is so fast it has frozen the movement. This was a shutter speed of 1/1250th of a second. Slow the shutter down and we get blur, but this time we get too much blur, and that's because the shutter speed is now 1/80th of a second, which is too slow. Finding a happy medium at 125th of a second, and we get that nice mix of a blurry background and a sharp cyclist. So the shutter speed that you use is completely dependent on how fast your subject is moving. So you need to practice this, try out different shutter speeds, and you will get a feel for what works. The great thing about attending a track event like the cycle race that I attended a few days ago is if you miss it, you've got another chance. They're going to come back round again. So all you've got to do is keep playing around with the shutter speeds until you find something that works. And with that event, 125th of a second was working really well and giving me great results. But of course, if I'm photographing some young kids playing around on their push bikes, they're not going to be moving nearly as quickly. So my shutter speed will need to go down a bit to get the blur because they're not moving so quickly. So maybe something around about 20th of a second or 40th of a second would be a good place to start. If I went to a motor racing event and I was photographing cars moving at speed, my shutter speed would be even faster because the cars are moving much faster. So then I'm looking at shutter speeds around about maybe 200, 250th of a second. So once again, the shutter speed that works really depends upon how fast the subject is moving. And like all things photography, best thing to do is get out there, practice. Coming up, I've got some great focusing tips for you, but before we get into that, I want to tell you about a very special offer from our friends at Skillshare who have kindly sponsored this video. Now, there's never been a better time to learn new skills, so if you're a creative person like myself, make sure you take a moment to check out Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creative people. Skillshare offers thousands of inspiring classes, topics including illustration, design, music, video, and of course photography for just $10 a month with an annual subscription. But as a subscriber to this channel, you can try Skillshare for free. My daughter loves drawing, so this week we've been watching together some great videos all about drawing and illustration using her iPad. So the first 1,000 of my subscribers who click on the link in the description below this video will get a 2-month free trial of premium membership so you too can explore your creativity and learn something new with Skillshare. Okay, so we've got our camera in the shutter priority mode. We found a shutter speed that gives us just the right amount of blur but the right amount of sharpness. The next thing we want to do is make sure that our subject is in focus. Now, focusing on moving subjects can be tricky, which is why cameras have a focus mode that is designed around movement. This on most cameras is referred to as AFC, autofocus continuous, sometimes CAF, continuous autofocus, and if you've got a Canon camera, this is AI servo. The easiest way to select the AFC mode if you've got a Nikon camera is to press the I button, select focus mode, and from the options, select AFC. On a Canon camera, you've got a couple of options. There is an AF button. Alternatively, press the Q button, select one shot, which is the default focus mode, press set and change this to servo. Press set again and you're done. Now, once you've selected this mode, all you got to do is press the shutter button halfway down and hold it halfway down, and your camera will adjust the focus as your subject gets closer or further away from the camera. It's a really good mode. Again, all the pros use this mode. Now, the next thing we want to do is make sure that the camera actually focuses on our subject and not on something else. So now I'm going to show you how you can select a single focus point, and my advice is to select the middle focus point. I'm going to show you very quickly how to do this on a Canon camera and also a Nikon. To do this on a Canon camera, you press the button top right on the rear of the camera to bring up the focus point selection tool. You then turn the dial on the top of the camera to select the focus points individually. If you turn it all the way, it goes back to auto selection, which generally I would avoid. I'm going to select the middle focus point, which is perfect for sports. Press the shutter button to lock this in. So on this Nikon camera, the focus points are currently set to auto. I'm going to press the I button to change this. I'm going to select autofocus area mode, selecting then single point autofocus, and press the shutter button halfway down to reset the screen. You'll see the middle focus point is highlighted because that is the default, but if I want to select a different focus point, I just use the multi-selector dial on the back of the camera. Here I'm going to lock in the middle focus point, which is perfect for sports. So once the camera settings are done, a really good panning shot comes down to technique. So let me share with you some really cool tips. I find it helps to point my feet in the direction of where I intend to take the image. Focus as the subject approaches, then try and do all the movement in the hips. The smoother the pan, the better the result. Also make sure you follow through with the pan. Don't stop as you press the shutter button, keep the pan going. Now, the panning technique is quite tricky, so do expect some misses. It's all about practicing. Remember, the shutter speed plays a massive part here because you've got to find the right shutter speed to give you that nice mix between the blur and the sharpness. But equally, technique plays a really, really important role here too. Now, the panning technique is not strictly for sports photography. You can use it on lots of different subjects. I've seen some amazing wildlife photos taken using this very same technique. Maybe you could go out into the backyard and take some photos of your dog running around the back garden. Maybe get the kids down to the local skate park and try it out on them. I hope you get some great results and have a lot of fun trying it out. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and give us a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Plus, of course, new videos every single week. So please consider subscribing and make sure you hit the little bell notification symbol. That way you'll get a notification every time I put a video out. Leave comments, suggestions and questions down below, and I'll catch you next time. See ya. Bye.